Hello, and welcome to the inaugural episode of Shootin the Para-Sh. Is
that what we're agreeing on?
I don't know. We haven't decided what we're going to call this, but this is just going to be a paranormal-based discussion that she and I, Bri here, and I have on the reg. So we keep thinking that this should be a video, this should be a podcast, so we're going to try it. And to see how this happens. We both have notes, so it's not going to flow perfectly. What is our topic today?
Our topic today is tulpa, or tulpas, and just as a disclaimer, neither of us are experts.
Yes, we have no idea what we're talking about.
This is our first conversation after doing preliminary internet research. We have been doing armchair research, so if you want to come for us. We're just talking about what we could find on the internet about tulpas, which was not much, and it was very hard. So,
we haven't made our own yet.
Yes. No, I don't want to do that. So, I guess we can get started.
So, I have, of course, my definition / history. It looks like we both did the same thing.
It's fine.
You can start with what you found, and then I can say what I found.
So, for my definition that I found the literal meaning of the word tulpa is kind of synonymous with magical creation, or a creation of coming from your mind or your imagination. So basically a creature or a person or something that you've made by your own thoughts.
Well, Wikipedia, everybody's favorite scholarly source.
Hey, they've got good sources on there.
True. A being or object which is created through spiritual or mental powers. Oftentimes we hear tulpa defined as a thought form. So I did want to kind of talk about my impressions of what a tulpa was when I started. I mean, I knew tulpa meant thought form. I knew it came from the East. And we hear the word a lot nowadays, and it seems to have become sort of like a paranormal catch-all. So if we're like, well, I don't know what this is, maybe it's a tulpa. It's just when all else fails, maybe it's a tulpa. So the word gets thrown around a lot as a good explanation for high strangeness that can't be explained in any other way. So it was interesting kind of looking into what a tulpa really was, and it was also interesting that it was hard to find good anecdotes. In all the podcasts, they'll be like, oh, maybe it was a tulpa.
Right.
But there's not, if you Google that, there's no good stories.
Yeah, and I was surprised that I found that one. But that's the only one.
The original.
That's the only one that I could find. And, Reddit is not helpful at all.
And then when I was kind of reading about this, there's lots of different definitions of what a tulpa is. Like, some people think it's simply a projection. Some people think it is a full-blown sentient being. And then, it just ranges in between all of those.
I also found during my research of the word and the history that they can be seen by other people and not just the creator. I'm not sure how common that is, depending on what stage you get in creating your tulpa, but we'll get to that.
How leveled up you are.
Yeah, basically. I also got that the concept of tulpa stems from Tibetan Buddhism, where the word tulpa actually originates and is used as a verb rather than a noun as we do in English language. And it was a practice primarily used by monks, where they would create these tulpas to overcome physical attachments like phobias, fears, addictions, things like that.
Something I found that was interesting, like you said, it originates in Tibet, and I thought it was interesting that the whole reason it was brought to the West was through the Theosophists. Why can't I say that? Theosophy. Via Theosophy. So explorers that were over there, that were in the Theosophic group.
Yes.
Brought it over here. And it just came through, from what I understand, it just came through that one channel.
Yeah, and I actually found an anecdote about a woman that kind of spearheaded bringing that over to the West, and her name was Alexandra David-Neel, and she's actually wrote a couple books. I don't know what they are. But she's written some books. Yeah, we haven't read them. But she really, really was fascinated with tulpamancy, which is the word that we would use to describe people that create tulpas, a tulpamancer. And she really became fascinated with it when she was traveling through Tibet and learning about their Buddhist practices. And so I have a bit of an anecdote. I guess I can paraphrase. She was traveling through Tibet, and one of the many mystical techniques she studied was tulpa creation. Alexandra David-Neel became so interested in this that she decided she was going to try to create one of her own. And I have a quote on here from Mysterious Universe's website when they wrote an article about tulpas that says, "What we imagine internally, when we quite literally put our minds to it, can mutate into full-blown reality of an external nature." So I feel like that's a pretty good way of describing what she was trying to accomplish. So how she went about creating a tulpa was by intense concentration and visualization. So you have to concentrate and imagine a person or a creature and just put all of your attention on it and visualize it and its characteristics and what it would do and how it would live and its history and all of that things. You really have to make it a real thing. And so she began doing that, and basically she created he was at first a little plump little monk guy. And the article that I read compared him to Friar Tuck, so I had a really cute picture of Friar Tuck, I guess we can. And basically when she first made him, he was completely innocent. He was just basically they compared him to a ghost, and he was just kind of flitting about. At first she was the only one that was able to see him, and then he became more and more real the more that she concentrated on it, to the point where it was indistinguishable from a hallucination to a real person. So there came to a point where she wasn't able to control it anymore. It had slipped away from her and became its own person, and it became sinister. And it wasn't a cute little sweet monk anymore. It just became taking on its own. It started taking on its own characteristics, and it just became evil. And more people in this area that she was staying in amongst the monks I
like it.
began noticing it and asking her about it and saying who is this? How did this person get here? And so she realized that she had to reabsorb it, because it just was, I mean, I didn't read anything about it causing havoc or doing anything bad, but she just decided that she didn't want to leave it out in the world because she didn't know what it could do. So the reabsorbing process was really, really difficult and exhausting for her, because she had to just I don't really know how to describe it. You have to basically just take all of the bad parts of the creation and bring them back into yourself, into your mind, and kind of push them away into your subconscious and obliterate them. And so that was very, very difficult for her to do, but she did it.
Did it, Alexander.
Yeah, she did it. But that was a long anecdote, sorry, but
that's okay. That's really interesting, and it reminded me of some of the research I came across was saying that it's a misconception that your tulpa can become sinister and actually hurt you. An example they gave was that even if a poltergeist is throwing stuff around the room, the person that experiences that is very rarely injured themselves. Mm-hmm. So I think that's kind of weird. Are these things trying to bluff?
Right.
And make us think that it can hurt us when it can't?
Yeah. I was really intrigued because I wondered what made it start to take on those more sinister forms. How did it, I really wonder when it got away from being completely in her control, maybe it was corrupted by the ways of our world,
or was she not giving it enough attention or something?
Or was it feeding off of bad parts of her mind? I don't know, just some things to think about. Oh, there was one more quote that I pulled from the Mysterious Universe article, which we'll put the links in the show notes. Or is that what they're called on the YouTube?
The description box.
The description box. I listened to too many podcasts. But it basically said that creating a tulpa is a matter that should never, under any circumstances whatsoever, be entered into lightly or without the benefit of a high degree of careful thought.
I want to touch on tulpamancy
yes.
later, but that immediately made me think of people who like to casually make a tulpa.
That's what I was going to go into.
The same way people like to casually lucid dream or something like that.
Yeah, that's what I really wanted to segue into, was people that view it more of a pastime, but also people that can accidentally make their own tulpas, which does happen.
I do have a description from a Theosophian master. And I'm going to read his quote. Every thought of man passes into the inner world and becomes an active entity by associating itself, coalescing, we might term it, with an elemental. That is to say, with one of the semi-intelligent forces of the kingdoms. It survives as an active intelligence, a creature of the mind's begetting, for a shorter or longer period, proportionate with the original intensity of the cerebral action which generated it. Thus, a good thought is perpetuated as an active, beneficent power, an evil one as a maleficent demon. And so man is continually peopling his current space with a world of his own, crowded with the offsprings of his fancies, desires, impulses, and passions. That was a pretty fancy way of terming it, but he's basically saying, like, every thought you have is, in a sense, a tulpa, even if it's a tulpa that's existing within your own, like, internal universe. And there's so many parallels that go along with intention setting and affirmations and, like, spell work and other magical practices, that it's just the thought becomes, you know, a seed, for example.
Right, so he's basically saying, like, it doesn't have to be, like, a creature or a person, like, just a thought of, like, I'm going to get a job is, like, a tulpa.
So this concept is pretty broad. It can be, like, I have tulpas of my wishes and desires in my brain, or it could be, like, this is my friend Bri, she's a tulpa. Maybe I'll read one more of these theosophic explanations. I sound like an idiot.
That's a hard word. I don't think I could say it.
All right. This is from Gus de Zarega. I have tried to make the case that ideas are more important than we usually acknowledge. They are more than just fleeting flights of subjectivity that pass through our minds and are gone. Thought forms are ideas on steroids. Ooh. I really like that.
I like that too.
They are also our creations, though I suspect they have other sources as well. Thought forms are dependent on the people who generate mental energy empowering them. Good or bad, they are expressions of human creativity. Take away our energy and focus, and they weaken. Maybe that's what happened to Homegirl. She just took away her energy and focus. Some are positive influence in our lives, and their relationship with us is symbiotic. Others are negative, and the relationship is parasitic because they depend on our anger and fear for their power. Anger and fear ultimately weaken us mentally, physically, and spiritually.
So could you say that, like, depression and anxiety are negative tulpas? That, like, you have a negative relationship with, like, negative thought forms that you're feeding?
Oh my gosh. We figured out mental illness.
It's a tulpa.
No, but that's a really good idea.
Well, yeah, and obviously it's more complicated than just that. Like, I can't just be like, oh, I solved your issues, because stop thinking about it.
People do often personify their mental illness as, like, something that's not them. It's like something that's separate from them.
Yeah. As someone who did struggle with depression, I am a believer that, like, your thoughts control your reality. And I know that's, like, the most cliche thing to say, and I hate myself for saying that. As a person who had depression, if somebody said, just don't think about it, I'd be like, but it like, preoccupying your mind with other more positive things really, really does make a difference. And you obviously do have to counter those bad thoughts that you're having, but there are ways to do it productively and to, you know, kind of free yourself from them.
Somehow I've gotten into this, like, more philosophical route, and I was hoping to get into, like, actual physical sentient tulpas and what's behind that, but sorry for all the philosophy I just spat out.
It's okay.
What you got? Let's move on.
Okay. My next kind of subject that I researched was people that created tulpas accidentally. Most of the time, people that do this don't even know what a tulpa is. They just kind of encounter these things and they're like, like that's strange. So, like, one example that I have is from Jim Harold's campfire.
Lame. I'm just kidding. We love Jim.
We love Jim. The Podfather, as he is known as. Isn't that great?
Said who?
Astonishing legend. But anyways, he had on his show, The Campfire, he had a caller who, she was an author, she is an author, and she was basically talking about how there was a point in her life where she was writing a story, and she was trying to think of a character to be like a boyfriend to her main character or something like that. Don't quote me on that. And so she was spending a lot of time visualizing him, what he would be like, what he would look like, what he would say, what his backstory was, so that she could properly portray him in her book. You know, she finally got it down, figured out what he was going to look like, what he would be like, and she wrote it down. And then she said sometime later she heard someone in her house, and she was going downstairs, and she saw this character in her house, and she knew it was him because he was wearing like the exact clothes that she had written him in, and he was like in the house talking to her husband, and he left, and she came downstairs, and she was like, who is that? And her husband was like, I don't really know, he just kind of like stopped by and was like asking about something. And she was like, that's the character from my book, what the heck? So like and then that's when Jim was like, well, do you think that could have been a tulpa? And she was like, I you know. And so just people that have these accidental manifestations, it's really intriguing to me to like write a character and then him like show up in your house.
Yeah, I think I heard a campfire story like that where someone designed a character and then she was just out and about and saw him like...
It might have been that one
in
too.
the store. I don't know.
Yeah, that it just...
But when I started hearing about that kind of idea, I felt a little less stupid for loving fictional characters so much. Because you say, like, well, they're not real. Why would you love them or why would you be so invested in them? Well, they could be real.
Like, the author could have made them into a real person, and they're just, like, out somewhere doing their own thing.
I wanted to talk about accidental tulpas in a different kind of way.
Okay.
I'm interested to know what the distinction is between an accidental tulpa and a poltergeist.
Oh, okay. I didn't talk about that. I did talk about something similar to that.
And I Googled it briefly and couldn't find any real material on that. But I think that's really interesting because in a way they could be the same thing. Although poltergeists are typically energy and don't really materialize as apparitions, whereas tulpas are more likely apparently to materialize in some kind of form. But those two seem to have a lot in common because poltergeists are usually generated unintentionally, just like an accidental tulpa. So that's definitely something that crossed my mind. And I probably could find some information about it, but I dug deep enough for all this, and so I'm sure you did too.
Yeah, it was hard. And I guess I could have looked on Google Scholar, because I'm sure there would have been something on there.
I thought about getting on the library's database too.
Yeah, I pulled up Google Scholar at work today, and I was like, I should have checked on this, but, it's okay. It's fine.
I mean, it's a rabbit hole. You gotta stop somewhere.
Yeah.
Let's talk about tulpamancy. Now, this is a quote that I found that I sent to her earlier today that was kind of disappointing. This is according to Sci Encyclopedia. The modern tulpa is a product of internet folklore. That's the Western modern tulpa. The modern tulpa is a product of internet folklore bearing little or no resemblance to the Tibetan tulpa. If you look on Google for anything about a tulpa, you'll probably get taken to Reddit, where the tulpamancers have taken residence.
The tulpamancers, they know what they're doing, guys. They know what they're doing, but not really.
It seems very like they're casually and recreationally creating tulpas just to see if they can, which there's nothing wrong with experimentation, but I'm curious as to like how strong these tulpas are. Are they like in your head, or is it like my friend Bri right here is a tulpa?
Yeah. I was curious about that too, because it just seemed like, and not to say that like not everyone can do this, but it just kind of was like casual things like, how do I get my tulpa to do the dishes for me, or so like something like that. And
how do I get my tulpa to get off my social media?
Like stuff like that, and I was just like, are they just trolling? Like I guess like that could have been what a bunch of that was people just trolling, but it really makes it difficult to find credible information because you have these people that are like...
Yeah. I was trying to find info about tulpas from like an occultist perspective or a magical perspective or even a religious perspective, but instead I'm getting... This is a great definition of tulpamancy. It's a colloquial term for the subculture practice of creating or interacting with tulpas, magical creatures or imaginary friends, servitors, and other mental constructs, as well as for acts of auto-hallucinatory training.
Yeah, I did see a lot of people on the subreddit that were talking about it being like imaginary friends or imaginary creatures, or that it's just like a mental construct, that it wasn't. There were a lot of writers that were going on there and saying like, well, I could turn my characters into a tulpa if I wanted to, but that's just another step up in their development or something like that. And I just saw that over and over and over again.
I could do it if I wanted.
Yeah, basically, they basically were saying like, I could if I wanted to, but I'm just not. And I was like, okay.
It's just, I don't know. It all seemed really weird. I don't want to say off-putting, but I was kind of like, this is not scholarly at all. I feel like this is a bunch of 15-year-olds like in their room trying to do something cool with their mind, which I don't know, maybe that's ignorant for me to say.
Well, and like I don't really know because I never tried to make my own tulpa, but I did like compare it to.
It sounds like a recipe or something.
Make my own tulpa. All right, step one. Add a little imagination. I was just like thinking in my, like as I was reading this and I was trying to connect the dots between like the Tibetan tulpas and the people whose tulpas hacked their Instagram, I was trying to think about what the process was for these Tibetan monks, like these Buddhist monks that went about creating tulpas as a way to better themselves, and what kind of ritualistic practices they would undergo. Like would they do cleansing or purifying?
It would have to be serious.
Yeah, like they were going into it with a mentality that it would benefit them and it would help them on their path to enlightenment. And so I was wondering like, okay, so like what rituals would they undergo during this process compared to a writer creating an accidental tulpa? I was thinking about, okay, and when I say ritual, I don't mean like a pagan ritual. I just mean like, okay, some people have like pre-game rituals or things like that. So I was like, does the writer have a sort of ritual that they undergo before they start writing? Do they like turn out the lights? Do they clear their mind? Do they take a shower? Do they do something like that?
Do they fast?
Yeah, is there something that they do before they start writing that could put them in a state of mind where it would be easier for them to create a tulpa? So I was just wondering, like, if you had any thoughts on like how, like what the connections would be between that.
I feel like there would have to be real discipline involved, and it wouldn't be as casual as some people are making it out to be. So I was listening to a podcast where Gordon White was saying that like we can't confuse legitimacy with equivalence. So if someone does create a tulpa simply within their mind, that is still legitimate, but it's not equivalent to Alexandra David-Neel's situation, for example. So we don't need to write off people's legitimacy if they're not manifesting full apparitions.
Yes.
But I think that it is not equivalent to something that, you know, the tulpamancers practices are not equivalent to the Tibetan monks.
Right. And like they could be creating tulpas and they may not be physical manifestations. They could be, like you said, in their minds, which still makes it a real tulpa. They're able to interact with it in these other ways, and especially if they're able to hallucinate it. But they're like with Alexandra David-Neel, like there are steps. So like you're able to visualize it, you're able to hallucinate it, you're able to control it, and then it breaks free of you. So it's not like one day you're just like, boom, there's my tulpa.
It evolves like a Pokemon.
Yeah. But yeah, so it's not, it's just, that's why it's just hard for me to believe that these people that are getting on Reddit and saying like, I need my tulpa to do my dishes, like I just don't, I mean, not that I don't.
Have you told your parents about your tulpa?
Yeah, it's just kind of like, do you have the discipline to have put this much concentration into creating a tulpa?
Yeah.
Like, it's hard for me to imagine that this many people are like, yeah, I created a tulpa. Like,
monks can do really cool stuff, but they have to like meditate for 70 years and fast and like don't speak for years and years and years in order to like build this energy or discipline or whatever you want to call it.
Right.
So but yeah, that doesn't mean that what us Westerners are doing isn't legitimate, but it's definitely not equivalent.
Yes.
Thanks, Gordon.
My last part was based on an article I read on psychologytoday.com, which was tulpamancy versus mental illness. Or, I mean, not like versus mental illness, but like
compared to.
Yeah. So, some people, like some psychologists or doctors or professionals will misinterpret tulpas to be a symptom of a mental illness. And we don't really know how accurate that is because these things are very hard to research, apparently, as we found out. So there's just a lot of misinterpretation and misunderstanding of like these tulpas could be a symptom of severe illness, but the article that I read was talking about, or was discussing, how tulpas could be beneficial to treating people with mental illness, which I thought was interesting. Could go either way, but it was basically it was talking about how tulpas could be used to kind of, I don't want to say distract people from their mental illnesses, but to alleviate some of the feelings that they're going through. And I don't really know if that means like creating a tulpa and giving it all of your problems, or creating a tulpa that can communicate with you and help you work through your problems.
If I may,
yes,
this made me think of where a tulpa could be useful for mental illness. Mm-hmm. I was listening to a YouTuber named Angela Benedict talk about her panic disorder and how her therapist told her that when she's having a panic attack, she needs to imagine a prudent person. She needs to envision an objective person sitting in the room with her, someone who's very calm, and someone who can say things like, everything's okay, like nothing's going wrong. Someone to kind of talk her down. Like, what would a prudent, objective person in the room say in this situation?
Ooh.
And in a way, like,
that could be a tulpa.
Yeah.
Like, if you, spend enough time visualizing it, that could be your tulpa, and you could be like, hey, girl, help me out.
And the prudent person would be like, Angela, I see you're not doing too well today.
Let's take some deep breaths, okay?
Make some tea and we'll breathe. Yeah, I'm ready for some discussion.
Okay, cool.
Questions.
All right.
Of course, in podcasts, we hear a lot about things like Slender Man, like Men in Black, Mothman,
yes,
and other urban legends possibly being tulpas, because especially like urban legends, we're feeding into it all the time.
Oh, yeah.
And then things like suddenly turn out to be they really happen.
But, that makes me think about if you have entire communities of people feeding into a mythical creature or a folkloric creature, that can really, really feed it. If you have all of these people everybody's not going to be concentrating on it the same amount all the time, but if you have all of these different people thinking about it at different times, I wonder if that's just as powerful as one person.
Am I helping Mothman right now?
I know. Am I helping Bigfoot?
Yeah, I love thinking about that kind of stuff, especially the things that seem freaking ridiculous, like Slender Man, and then apparently people do see Slender Man.
And try to kill their friends for Slender Man.
I also think about, this is another thing that's really interesting to me, the concept of doppelgangers. What if those are most likely or most often tulpas?
Ooh.
But
that doesn't explain why the theory of if you see your doppelganger, you'll die.
Yeah, but does that ever come true?
I don't know. I don't know anyone that's seen their doppelganger.
Me either. Let me know if you've heard of a real case of someone seeing their doppelganger and dying. Mm-hmm. But, that could be a superstition. Superstitious people. I'm just kidding.
They're on mouse.
But, yeah, so, if there's some girl walking around that looks just like Katie, and it could be me, then I unintentionally made it, or I purposefully made it. I don't know.
What if it's a romanticized version of yourself? Or the opposite, the version of yourself that you don't like?
Ooh, that's deep.
Ooh,
and
that's
then
good.
I also like to think about how the tulpa concept can apply to hauntings and apparitions and things that we see. It could be someone else's tulpa that's I have this little quote regarding residual hauntings. This is from Psi Encyclopedia as well. Hauntings, or place-bound apparitions, might reflect a memory-based repetitive compulsion thought form.
So that kind of makes me think about similar to how we've talked about before, time not being linear, and time just being like a cake, and apparitions or ghosts or whatever we see are just breaches in time and we're just seeing something happening at the same or at a different time in the same place. And
you know, when I was a kid, I tried to make my own ghosts.
Really?
Yeah.
Did it work?
And I would like, if I would have friends come over, I'd be like, oh, that's the ghost Sylvia. You can hear her. Like, she makes the wind blow and stuff like that.
Let's go check on Sylvia.
Yeah, really. Okay, and then this was really, really cool. And I've told you about this idea before, the third man effect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Where if you're in some sort of a dire situation, like if you're climbing Mount Everest, if me and Bri are climbing Mount Everest and we're very close to death, but we're trying to make it, and we both get the feeling that someone else is with us, like another person is with us. Science Encyclopedia talked about this concept. They didn't call it the third man effect, but I connected those dots. So they say, there exist also numerous cases where a sense of presence is reported by travelers in conditions of extreme stress, sometimes interpreted as a ghost or discarnate entity.
I must always be I must always be in conditions of extreme stress because I always feel like there's somebody with me all the time.
Wait. Ooh. That's another podcast. Ooh. So maybe when you're in a situation like this, you're unintentionally creating a tulpa that keeps you company. That like, it almost has like a guardian angel.
That's what I was literally about to say. Like, what about guardian angels? Like, could that?
I don't like that. I want my guardian angel to be an entity that I didn't create.
And not me protecting myself.
A figment of my own imagination.
Yes. I just really like this question. Like, can underlying feelings of stress, anxiety, and depression personify themselves into a human or creature representation of feelings that plague the creator's mind?
Oh, man. Like,
I just feel like that's possible because, you know, like the commercials for like anxiety and depression medicine, they always like show the mental illness is like a figure or a creature that's like following the person around.
Yeah.
You know? That's like, it just is like dragging them down all the time. So I'm like, I mean, it could be possible that it's just like if you spend so much time thinking like, I'm so depressed, I'm so sad, I'm never going to get better, that it could just like personify or turn into something.
Yeah. The Gordon White podcast I'm listening to right now, he was talking about the dragon and how people see dragons. Like, people have always seen dragons, but obviously dragons aren't real. But he's like, dragons are fear itself personified. Dragons are our fears created into an entity. So it's like an external expression of the fear we all have. And it was like kind of hard to wrap your mind around, but that kind of seems applicable.
Right, and it also makes me think of another Jim Harold Campfire episode that I was listening to today.
Tell us what happened.
And the strangeness that ensued. About this woman that called and was talking about they called it the monkey bat, but it was the white. It was basically like a Mothman, but it was a bat, and it was completely white. And how she saw it several times, and then she, like, her brother saw it, and then she found out that people all over the small town that she'd been living in had seen it, like, over and over again. And so it just is like things like that. I wonder, like, could they be a tulpa? Because, like,
yeah, because they do feed it.
Yeah,
they tell the story,
and it could have been like something that someone just created, and you know, they were like, oh, wouldn't it be cool if like this thing was like terrorizing the town and like freaking people out,
like a curse.
Yeah. Ooh. There are just also so many other things that I could say that it could be, but those are topics for another time.
We're gonna have fun here on Shootin the Para-Sh.
I think I like that. The more you say it, I like it.
All right. If you have a better idea, let us know.
We love puns. Para-puns. Ooh, okay, I really like this question. Are some people more likely to create a tulpa based on their receptivity to the spiritual world or other factors? And we were kind of talking about that a little earlier today about like astral projection and lucid dreaming. Like, are some people just able to do that? Are they like just born more open,
creative,
more intuitive? Like, they're just able to receive and give to the spiritual realm in a way that other people are not? Do some of us have our blinders on? Like, what?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would have to say that I think it would be easy for some people, and then I feel like other people could get to that point, but they would have to train and have more heavy ritual involved in preparing yourself for that.
So some of these Reddit tulpamancers could be telling the truth, but not all of them. Not all of them. There's
I'm just like, but what if you're not good at it, but you're telling yourself you made a tulpa and you're pretending you have that tulpa and it's your friend or whatever, like, then how is it not real, even if you're pretending?
I mean, I guess it is real, but
everything's real.
It is real, it just isn't taking like a physical form.
Right. Okay. And that was a question I had. Do you think it's possible to create a full-blown, physical, sentient tulpa in this physical world?
I mean, maybe. Like, I don't know. I mean,
we can't say anything for certain.
Yeah, like that's just everything about the paranormal. Like, it's not black or white. It's not yes or no. Like, you just gotta be open to the possibility that anything could happen. And I mean, you know, I wonder. Okay, so like, what if your dog died and you really, really missed your dog, and you just spent forever imagining your dog and everything about him, and you just tried to like bring him back to life. Like, what if you could? Because, you know, there are some instances where people, like, their dogs die and they end up finding a dog that's exactly like it.
We need to do a podcast on animal reincarnation.
I totally feel like that's real. I mean, I believe, like, reincarnation is totally, I feel like, personally, I believe in reincarnation anyways, like, but...
Mood.
Yeah. Do you think animals just kind of, like, get stuck in an animal cycle? Like, do you think they bounce from animal to animal, or do they stay in one species?
Oh, shit. I don't know.
Or is it, like, they're karmic? Like, do you think we could be a dog? Or are we destined to be... This is a completely different subject. But I just have the thought in my head.
This could be our next episode.
Ooh.
Oh, well, to answer my own question, do I think
yeah.
it's possible to create a fully physical, sentient, autonomous tulpa? This sounds... It's so crazy.
It is.
But I would have to say yes. Because I think anything's possible.
Well, and I guess if you believe that intention setting and affirmation and manifesting is real, like if you believe that your your thoughts can create reality in an abstract sense, then I guess they can in an objective sense as well. Like,
yeah,
I feel like it would just be a lot harder and take a lot more time. Maybe we should try. Maybe we should
join the tulpamancy Reddit.
Yeah, ask them what their tips are. If you got any tips, let us know below. If you've created your own tulpa, give us the details.
What would you have your tulpa do for you?
Rub my feet.
Yeah, I need a back massage.
Mm-hmm. But is that its purpose? Its purpose shouldn't be to rub my feet. Its purpose should be to help me work through my traumas.
Its purpose should be to help me open my third eye.
I
think this was a good talk.
I think it was good.
Do you have anything else to add?
Any closing thoughts? I don't think so. I think I hit everything I wanted to talk about.
It's a really fun concept. It's really hard, and it's a big rabbit hole.
It is. And I wish that there was more concrete information, and maybe there is. We didn't really get to spend a whole lot of time.
We didn't read a book. We could read a book.
We could read a book, and we could do some like Google Scholar searching and give an update. Update.
I'm gonna put update right there in the corner.
Update. And then if we update, we can plug it in. But yeah, I mean, I feel like I would like to read some like Google Scholar articles and see what they've got, because there are paranormal researchers and investigators that have published work that's legitimate. And even though like you can get into the whole rabbit hole of like, well, it's staged, it's fake, like that's true, but you kind of just have to take everything with a grain of salt. Like
right.
in this field, you have to just take you can't you have to digest everything, but you can't just believe it all, and you can't, what is the word? Dismiss it all. You just have to.
And you also can't fault people for believing in what they believe in.
Mm-hmm.
You have to believe people.
Yeah.
And what they believe.
Yeah, there was, I was listening to one Astonishing Legends? either Astonishing Legends or Mysterious Universe. And they had a podcast episode where they were talking about mediums and people that do like spoon bending. And have you listened to one? You know what I'm talking about?
That could be a fun topic to talk about too. Telekinesis
and the mini lab. Did you listen to that one?
I don't think so.
But they were just talking about how like this group of people that did like these spoon bending and medium and seance things were faking some things, but some things were real. And this could go into tulpamancy as well. They faked some things because they had you believing it was real, and you believing it was real helped the real things manifest. So like you have to have some proof, whether it's fake or not, to get you going to help with the actual thing manifest.
I forgot a thing.
Oh, please tell.
This was the best anecdote I could come up with.
Oh.
I already did a video about this, but it's called the Philip experiment.
Okay.
Have you heard of this?
Maybe.
It was an parapsychological experiment done in the 70s in Canada. 8 people gathered together once a week for an extended amount of time, and they created a character named Philip, a medieval man who died at age 30. They made up his whole life story, made up everything. Then they started conducting seances to contact Philip, because the experiment was to see if they could create their own spirit. And pretty soon, believe it or not, Philip began responding to their questions in the seance, and he would answer everything correctly.
Do you think
according to the details they made?
Philip, or do you think it was another spirit that was trolling them?
That is the question. But
spirits like to have fun, y'all. Like, they like to play around.
Tricksters.
I love tricksters.
But some people do think that the Philip experiment was a great example of the creation of a tulpa. He was not a real man. These details weren't real, but somehow he was able to confirm the details of his life, his personality, and everything.
It makes me think of that, it takes me back to that podcast episode. I think it was Mysterious Universe, but I'm not sure. But it's like the mini lab, so there was this, I don't remember his name, but there was this...
Did I listen to that? Maybe you told me about it.
I think I did. But there's this paranormal researcher who constructed this mini lab, and it was basically a glass box filled with objects. And he would shut it, and he would put all of these contraptions on it so that he knew nobody was messing with it. And he set a camera in front of it, and the camera was operated by motion, so whenever something moved inside the lab, it would just start taking pictures. And he would put it in the basement of this medium's house, and nobody went down there unless the camera went off, and then they would go check. So what they did was they were talking to the spirits that were in the house, and they would write write questions and things in envelopes and put them in the mini lab, and then they would do seances and ask the ghosts questions, and it would answer inside the mini lab. And so they would have to go open the envelopes, and the answers would be written inside the envelopes to their questions. Now, they weren't always the right answers, and they sometimes they would write an answer in an envelope, but it would be to a question that was in a different envelope. So they would, you would have to go in there and look at it and be like, okay, it was engaging. And another thing that it did was that it was writing letters to people. So this was interesting. And I mean, this is all up if you believe this or not. People were putting letters in the mini lab, asking it questions, and it would reply in the letter, and it would mail the letters to them. So it would dematerialize its responses, materialize them at a post office, okay? And not in the people's mailboxes, it would materialize in the post office so that there was energy constantly going through the letter as it was being transported. But the letters would go to the wrong people. So a bunch of people would write letters, and they would all get mixed up. But it was so the people would communicate and talk about the ghost, and that was attributing more energy to it.
What?
Yeah, right?
Oh, that's why they're tricking us.
Yeah.
That's why they're being tricksters in the first place.
Because it makes you think about them and talk about them. And it
feed them.
Yeah. And so, one of the biggest holes that people were poking through it was that the handwriting on the letters was really similar to the man's handwriting that the mini lab was housed in. But it would spell words wrong, and it would
spirits be like that.
Yeah, its handwriting was like his, but it wasn't exactly like his. So what they deducted was in the basement there were boxes that he'd written on and labeled, and so they think that it looked at his handwriting on these boxes and just like mimicked it.
That's crazy.
I know. It was a really
stuff.
good episode. I like listened to it when I was driving to Matt's, and it was really good.
This has been really thought-provoking.
Mm-hmm. I've liked this.
I think we did good.
I hope you guys enjoyed this.
It's a wrap. Yeah. Do you have any thoughts or suggestions for future topics?
Yes, let us know.
Yeah. All right, we're signing off.
All right, guys. We did it. First one. We did it.
Yeah. Gold star. Bye.
Bye.